Hi, Debbie. It's great to have you here again. Was just mentioning before I hit record that with your content, it's such practical information. I refer so many betrayed partners to these webinars to just kind of pick through how, what can I do next? It's overwhelming. So, what do you got for us today?
Well, today we're going to talk about communication because
Oh,
I am seeing some issues show up in my office that I believe communication is one of the ways that we can resolve some of the struggles that betrayed partners and addict partners face when they're trying to rebuild trust and connection. So here's what's showing up in my office. Um, and this is basically, I'm going to talk from the viewpoint of the betrayed partner right now. I've had several come in this last week and say to me, how much longer am I going to feel this way? And I'll ask them, how long have you been, managing this? When was disclosure? And they might say a year. Or I'll have someone come in and say, gosh, why am I not getting over this sooner? Or how long is it going to take before I feel like my life is normal again? Or they might want to know, when will my relationship feel safe? When can I feel like, I'm going to be able to move forward? When will the relationship feel secure? So I'm getting various forms of those questions. And we have to keep in mind that when we are trying to rebuild trust and connection due to the attachment injury that the addict partner's acting out has caused, that it's going to take the betrayed partner anywhere from 18 months to 3 years to finally feel like everything feels more stable. They've got skills and tools that they're using. And a side note, and that is that this means that you're actually working on recovery. It takes 18 months to 3 years. A lot of betrayed partners wish that I could give them this detailed plan. Like, here, you do this, this, and this. And if you check off all the boxes, then you're going to feel good and you're going to be recovered. Unfortunately, there is no checklist. There is no destination. There is no finish line. This is a path of recovery, and there are some really important tools that can help us along those paths. And one of the most basic ones I believe that can help is communication. And I find that when couples come in to see me, they're trying to repair the attachment wounding, that they're really not good at communication. So here's why sometimes it is so difficult for communication to take place. Well, first of all, we have a betrayed partner who's really feeling threatened, and the disconnection feels threatened. They don't feel safe. They don't feel secure. So they might move into those safety seeking behaviors. Remember, in codependence, we talk about those behaviors as the loved one's attempts to make sure that their partner is safe and secure so they can move towards them. And while these are loving attempts, they may not know the best way to do it. So they move into these behaviors trying to create connection. So oftentimes when they're not being heard, a betrayed partner will speak louder. They might get angry. They might try to convince their addict partner to please validate me. I need you to understand where I'm coming from. And we end up in a negative cycle. They just want their feelings to be acknowledged, to be validated, to be legitimized. And so trade partners really need to talk about it. They need to communicate. And when the betraying partner doesn't want to communicate about it, the betrayed partner feels unsafe. They move into the fear cycle. And remember, with the fear cycle, they move into control behaviors. They move into the release behaviors where they just let go. They don't do anything. They emotionally dysregulate. And they even go into trauma responses. So communication is so important. Unfortunately, the addict partner, in their best attempts, but trying to stay what they think is grounded and to be understood, might respond with things like, it doesn't help to keep talking about all of this. We can't keep going back to the past. We just need to move on and focus on the future. Or they might say, you know what? You need to stay on your own recovery path. You need to get off of mine. Another thing I hear is, my therapist says I don't need to share anything with you until we do disclosure. And so they won't share anything. Another one is, how many times do I have to answer the same question? We've been over this so many times. Or you just want to talk about it because you want me to feel bad. Or you need to look at the things you're doing too. I'm not the only one who's making mistakes. You've got some things that you need to take care of as well. So you can see that this adds to that negative cycle of disconnection that this couple is in when they really want to rebuild the trust and repair the attachment. Unfortunately, the addict partner, the betraying partner, doesn't like to talk about hard things because shame can come up. They feel like they're a failure, they feel like they blew it. And so that shame causes them to get defensive. And sometimes it causes them to become avoidant. I'm going to pull away and I don't want to talk about anything. So I don't have to manage those distressing emotions. But the addict partner has to be able to work through it at some point where they push through the shame to take accountability, which means we have to talk about hard things. The addict or betraying partner may not talk about it because they're terrified that if they're honest and they're open in their communication and what they share, that they might be rejected. They might be abandoned by the betrayed partner. Another reason is they just don't even know how to talk about it. They have no clue what to say, how to do it, how to discuss it. So while the betrayed partner is spending a lot of energy trying to get the addict partner to talk to them, to validate their feelings and emotions, they can get stuck. And so they're not moving forward in their own recovery and in their own healing journey. So that's why communication is so important. It's not going to be easy, but today I'm going to give you lots of ideas and tools that are very applicable in helping you communicate and rebuild trust and connection when we have this major attachment wounding that occurs with betrayal. So let's talk first of all about some just communication skills. These are so simple. This is how I approach my partner when I'm going to communicate. So the first thing you can do is just make sure that you slow down and look your partner in the eyes. So as you're speaking, you need to move closer because what we know is our vision does a couple of things. First of all, if I'm too far away, my vision doesn't take in as much light. And so that dorsal system, which creates fear in our body, gets kicked in. We feel it in our gut. We don't feel safe and secure. But the closer you move to me and you make eye contact, then that's going to cause that part of my nervous system that is calmer to kick in. So I need you closer. I need to see your face, your facial expressions. I need to take in the details. I need to notice the subtle nonverbals that you have. It helps in staying present when you've got that eye to eye contact. Second, you have to slow it down. Came across a quote John Wayne said, "Talk low and slow and don't say too much." And that is so perfect as far as a communication skill tool goes when we're trying to understand where somebody's coming from. So we can lower our voice. We can say our words less fast, right? So I'm going to be very intentional in what I say because we need to tune into our nervous system. When our own nervous system kind of kicks in, right, and we're going to go a little more towards that limbic part of our brain, when we're edging towards fight, flight, and freeze, what happens is our voice goes up, not only in the tone of it, but also in the intensity of it. And so we have to make sure that we stay grounded. So talking slower, and kind of lowering your pitch just a little bit really helps in staying grounded a whole lot. Thirdly, communicate in person. I can't tell you how many couples try to communicate through text messaging. And that is a big problem because I don't see nonverbals. I take things out of context. I might say something and it's totally misinterpreted. So it's very, very important that we have to put words to it and say it out loud. It's hard. So I'm going to give you some tools in a minute to help you in talking about those hard things. But we have to be able to be present with each other, to see each other's eyes, to look at each other's faces as we work through things. The fourth thing is to ask and get your partner's input regarding how they want to communicate. So this gives the betrayed partner a sense of more safety and control. So here's what you do. You ask them if they just want to talk about it. You don't even need to say anything, just listen. Maybe they want you just to sit next to them. Maybe they just want you to give them time to process it. Maybe they want you to give them some empathy. So ask them what they need. Observe and hear their words. Make sure that before you do anything, you check in with your partner. So it's important that you get their permission. And I'll give you some ideas in just a moment as we go along. Fifth, know how to take an appropriate timeout or a pause if things don't go well. We don't have to fight through it. When things start to fall apart, when we're having a discussion, typically means we're no longer connected to prefrontal, which is that executive functioning part of our brain, the front part of our brain. Instead, we're moving into the fight, flight, freeze area, right to that limbic part of our brain called the limbic system. So we are now in emotional dysregulation. We cannot logically work through things when we're operating out of this part of our brain. So you have to be aware of that. Again, it goes back into that concept of I have to know what's going on internally for me. What is my nervous system doing? And then we can call a pause. And we're going to talk about a timeout boundary in a moment, but calling a pause does not mean we're stopping the conversation for good. It just means we're pausing to regroup, to get grounded, and to come back in a more regulated way so we can actually accomplish things. We can create connection. And then the sixth thing is you have got to acquire the necessary communication tools. So today we're going to talk about a few of those communication tools. And I find that if couples do this in recovery, it helps tremendously in creating connection. So the first communication tool I want to talk about is reflective listening. One of the books that I have couples read, because it's very thin and it's chock full of good information, is a book called I Hear You by Michael S. Sorensen. And it's got great ideas in there on how to validate and how to reflect. So I always give my couples this tool. And what I want them to do is as they are sitting down and communicating, the goal is I'm trying to understand my partner. I'm trying to understand where they are coming from. I don't have to agree with how they see it, but I need to step into their shoes and try to view it as they are viewing it. And one of the best ways to do that is through reflective listening. So first of all, you have to listen without responding or interrupting. I have some couples that they're just so busy talking over each other that they can't even get through the entire conversation because we immediately go into disconnection. We go into that negative cycle. So if you have to, then get your talking stick or your talking pen so that whoever's holding it, they're the one who gets to speak, or set a timer and let that person talk. And so if you're the person who is listening, my recommendation is that you get a notebook or something to write in, and what you're going to listen for, instead of thinking about how you're going to counteract what your partner said or what your defensive, argument is going to be, you're going to listen for the feeling words. What are they feeling? Right? What are they experiencing? I really also, sometimes I'll even write little quotes, right? Here's what I heard my partner say that I want to go back and talk about. So then that way I don't feel like I have to interrupt, but I really want to eye contact, observe, and listen. Then before I even respond to what my partner has said, I ask permission. So you say things like, can I respond to that? Can I give my input? Can I say a few things? So I'm just getting their permission. But before I go into what I want to say, I have to reflect back what they said. And I'm not interpreting what they said. I'm literally saying the exact same words I just heard. I'm showing my partner that I actually heard them. I'm going to use the same words they use. I'm going to say sentences the exact same way they did. And I'm going to check in to make sure that I heard them right. And then when I do go to respond, I'm going to use more of the I statements. Because when I talk about what's going on internally for me and my experience, rather than focusing externally on what the other person is doing, I'm going to create connection. So that leads us into tool number 2, which is the talking boundary format that I talk about all the time. This is the best way to actually stay into that I position, right? Coming from that point of, here's what's going on. Here's my internal world. So there are 4 points. 4 parts rather, or 4 steps. The first one is you're going to share what you see and what you hear. So this is what I heard my partner say. This is what I heard you say. This is what I saw you do. This is strictly data. This is not the interpretation of the data. This is not assigning meaning to the data. It's things like when I saw you do this, when I noticed this, when I hear you say this, right? It's very observable, very factual. Okay. Second step, I'm then going to share the thoughts I have when I see those things and hear those things. So these are kind of the stories I go into. So it's going to be phrases like, what I tell myself when I see that and hear that is, or what I make up about this is, the story I'm telling myself about that is, and so now I can share everything that's kind of going on inside of me. And then this third step is I'm going to express how I feel. This is an emotion. So my thoughts are going to generate an emotion. So my stories I'm telling myself, when I see that and I hear that, it makes me feel really sad or I feel really lonely. And the fourth step is you're going to state what it is you need, or you're going to state the boundary depending on what the situation is. So it's going to be like moving forward, would you be willing to? Moving forward, I would like. Those types of things. If this happens again, then here's how I'm going to handle it. So it's a really great way to communicate back and forth. And I'm not focusing on what the other person is doing wrong. I am now focusing on what my internal experience is, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and what I need. Such a great way. So then that kind of leads into the third tool, which is I mentioned a timeout boundary or a pause boundary earlier. So when you're having communication and it's not going well, when one of you becomes emotionally dysregulated, and you typically know when your partner is, you might notice body language change. You might see them breathing differently. You might hear their intensity of their words coming out, in a different manner. So if that's the case, then you want to call a timeout or a pause to the conversation. Now, I've had some clients come in and say, I hate the word timeout. I feel like I'm being gaslit when somebody says, okay, timeout. So my recommendation is then say, hey, can we call a pause to this conversation? Then you can add words to it that create connection, like, I really want to work on this with you. I really do want to solve this, but I just need some time to get grounded. I just need things to settle down a bit. So what you're going to do is you're going to determine before you leave when you're going to come back. I really like that part of it. Can we get together in 30 minutes? Now, remember, takes the brain about 20 to 30 minutes to get back online. What do we mean by online? We mean out of the limbic system, out of fight, flight, and freeze, and connected to prefrontal, where we've got logic, reasoning, emotional regulation capabilities. Okay, so 20, 30 minutes. During the 20 or 30 minutes or 2 hours or within 24 hours, which is maximum, you can only go 24 hours, the person calling the timeout must be the one who readdresses it, who comes to the other person and says, we need to continue this conversation. So that's very, very important. When you come back, my recommendation to couples is during that pause and that timeout, do some good self-care. Go out and do anything with bilateral movement. So go out and walk, ride a bike, go out and swim in your pool right now if it's too hot where you're at. Do cross-body tapping. Listen to music, anything that soothes you. Be active in getting grounded. And then go use the 4-part talking boundary. So when I heard you say this and I saw you do this, here's the story I'm in, right? Here's how I'm feeling. Here's what I need. Because where we really want to go is we want to go to that point of meeting each other's needs. And that's a great way to do it. So we get out of the stories and we can focus more on the need. That's really, really important. Tool number 4, which is a big one, and that is structured regular check-ins that foster accountability, connection, trust, and safety. So it's important that we have the following: accountability, trust, safety, connection. So check-ins are an important part of recovery. They just are. We have to check in with each other. We have to discuss our recovery journey with each other. And it is not a replacement for therapy, but it is should be a part of your recovery plan. Check-ins must be done on a regular basis to rebuild trust and connection. If you're not doing them regularly, then you're not going to feel the connection. Check-ins need to be the responsibility of the addict partner. I really do feel that, although it doesn't always work out that way. So my recommendation is that the couple set a timer once they determine, which is specific agreements, which are, here's the days we're going to do it, here's the times we're going to do it, here's where we're going to do it. And then you put that in your phone, you have an alarm go off, and you meet at the designated spot. It's very, very important. Determine a frequency. Some couples will do check-ins nightly. My recommendation is they not be long check-ins. We have to understand the length of the check-in. I think we can mix up check-ins, and I'm going to give you all sorts of examples of check-ins to do. So you've got to check in and meet the needs. What do you guys need as couples to talk about, right? How can we put kind of a structure around it that keeps us on track and helps create connection? So it's really important that when you go and you do your check-ins, that your location you go to is neutral. It's free from distractions. So what do I mean by neutral? By neutral, I mean it's not in our bedroom on the bed, right? It's not in front of the children, right? It's got to be a safe place. The other thing is determine as a couple how you're going to handle missed check-ins. Maybe it's because one of you is on a business trip. And so, or you've got some kind of a commitment with one of the children who have an extracurricular activity. So then determine how are we going to decide on a missed check-in? Do we do it the following day at the same time? So come up with an agreement on that. Determine if there are distractions, how's that going to be handled? Let's say all of a sudden the kids need us, and so we're going to maybe pause the check-in. And if we can't do it that day, then we do it 24 hours later. So anticipate things that can come up. Also, determine what format you're going to use. Just going in and checking in and going, okay, I'm checking in, how are you doing? Not going to necessarily get you the data that you want. It's not going to create that safety, that sense of security, and rebuild that trust. So the big one out there is FANOS. We know that that's an acronym for feelings, affirmation, needs, owning or offering, sobriety or struggle. So this is what my couples will come in and tell me they do. So with FANOS, the first thing we share is feelings. So you're going to state the predominant feeling that you're feeling in the moment. Now, this is open for discussion. As I tell my clients, this is just a snapshot to let you know where your partner's coming from. Here's where what I'm feeling right now, or here's what I felt today. We're not going to talk about how I feel about you. We're really going to share an emotion. So I understand the internal state of my partner. The second thing is an affirmation. You're going to offer your partner an affirmation. You're going to tell them thank you for something that he or she did. It's something that you value them doing for you, that you recognize they've done for you. So I'm affirming that you have really done something to help me. Thirdly, we're going to share something that we need. So you're going to ask for something that you need, remembering that sometimes your partner may not be able to meet that need. And so you ultimately are responsible, but maybe it's what I need from you is I need a hug every day, or I need 20 minutes without the kids. When, you come home from work, can I go out and can I go for a walk this week? Something like that is when we share that during our check-in. The next one is owning. I'm going to take responsibility for something I did. Maybe it's something that created disconnection. Maybe it was something that I failed to do that I should have done as far as my recovery work, or I'm going to offer an apology if necessary. So I'm going to take accountability. Great way to take accountability is during a check-in. The next one is sobriety. So the addict partner is going to check in about their sobriety and let their partner know what the status of it is. If sobriety is no longer an issue, then maybe they're going to be accountable for some other problematic behavior, like their shame. Maybe my shame, I'm struggling with my shame coming up, and here's how I'm handling it. Or for the betrayed partner, it's the struggle. Here's what I'm struggling with. The addict partner can also share, here's what I'm struggling with as well. But we can share, okay, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I'm doing about it. Here's my recovery plan. Here's the tools I'm using to help with it. It creates so much security in knowing that. So that's Fanos. The next one is what I call recovery communication check-in. And with this, again, like I said, I recommend you do it at least once, if not twice a week. Set a timer for 15 minutes max. We want this to go fairly quickly because we can get kind of a little bit stuck in some of these questions if we don't. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to share one word that describes how we feel emotionally, physically, spiritually, and relationally, meaning between the two of you in that moment. So emotionally, it might be calm. Physically, it could be tired. Spiritually, it could be connected. Relationally, it could be concerned. Those are the types of words we share. Again, we don't go into the explanation. It's a snapshot of how my partner is coming in to check in. That's it. Then share what you're currently working on in your recovery journey. It creates security and trust. If I know that my betraying partner is literally going to their therapist and they're working on their workbook and their recovery group, and my betrayed partner is focusing on self-care, it's really, really important. Report what tools you're currently using in recovery. Report any struggles you've had since the last check-in, and then what recovery work you're doing to help you with those struggles. And then this is an opportunity to state, is there anything else that I need to discuss, right? I want to talk to you about maybe something I learned in my group, or maybe I need to just talk to you about frustrations I'm having with the kids, or that I need to spend more time with you, or that I've got a fear that keeps coming up. If you need to, you can set the timer for more time. So I say, if you're going to go a little longer, you're going to discuss something, you're going to use your 4-part talking boundary. You're going to use timeout if you need it. You can set the timer for 15 more minutes and see. And if you need to put a pause on it and come back to it the next day, then you can do that as well. Okay. Another one my couples use is the high-low. Very simple. In our family, we call it, what are the thorns that happened today? What are the roses, right? It's the good and the bad. So what we do is we check in and say, what was the best part of your day, right? What was the hardest part of your day? And we're just connecting in that moment on, how did it go for you? What do you think was the best thing you did today? What was the hardest thing you did today? And so it keeps us connected. We're going to validate each other in understanding that, yeah, that'd be really hard to deal with that. And oh, I can relate to that. I've experienced that before. You must be feeling really concerned. That's just a really simple way. So if you are doing some of those more detailed check-ins during the week, you could do high and low before you go to bed every night. Or it could be, I've had some couples say sobriety, yes, and what are you working on? Those two things, come up with a couple of things. And then the last form of check-ins is preset questions. You can come up with so many different questions that maybe even put these questions on slips of paper, stick them in a basket, pull them out, and just check in. So it can be things like, what are the specific recovery tools you've implemented since our last check-in? Share a new insight about yourself that you've learned since our last check-in. What have you done to promote healthy relationships with our children since the last check-in? At present, what is the most challenging part of your healing process? What recent growth do you notice in yourself? What recent growth do you notice in me? What help or support do you need in this coming week? At present, describe one thing that would help you in your recovery journey. What emotions have been most present for you since our last check-in? So you get the idea. We can just put anything on there and then we can pull them out randomly, or you can go through the list and go, this is my number one question for the week. And each of you choose a question to discuss. Again, I do believe in same time, same location, setting a timer. We don't want these check-ins to go half an hour. Well, half an hour is not bad. An hour, 2 hours. We don't want them to start at 10 o'clock at night. We really have to be aware of the time we do them, the location we do them, the format, because remember, the goal is to create connection. It's to be able to stay regulated and to communicate. The bottom line is we can't heal what we're not willing to lean into, and we can't heal what we're not willing to talk about. So, the way we communicate with each other ultimately determines the quality of our healing and the recovery work we do, and as well as the outcome. So, hopefully, this gives you some just basic ideas on how to create connection through communication because it's really hard. We're dealing with a lot of attachment wounding, but hopefully, I've given you at least one idea to implement in the next week.
So when you said some people struggle with the timeout, I was like, I was surprised that it was to the gaslighting because I was always like, I always think about kids being in timeout. So I was thinking more the relationship, like if we're calling a timeout, I feel like I'm being put in timeout. So I was surprised at that. I wanted to talk about, and we will get to the questions and I will share where the recording will be. But the betrayed partner, like, oh shoot, like it didn't ring the whole time I was muted. So, but like the timing, the 18 months to 3 years. And I know a whole bunch of you went, oh my gosh, but life is life and life, continues to happen. And this is not like it's going to be horrible. And then at 18 months, everything's going to be, all together. You will see progress along that path. And I'm sure you do too, Debbie, but I see people, I've had people call even this week that are like, you know, like a very short amount of time, and now we're ready to to do something really fast that is going to change everything. And so like even when you're talking about slow everything down and just understand this is a journey, and that's hard, but I'm telling you, like the people that pace it and are willing to do the work, that shifts things. Anything else would be a facade or like slapping a band-aid on something that needs a deep wound. Carrie, like trying to rush it, like which lots of addicts, well, I'm partners too, but lots of addicts are going, yes, like you said, let's get, that's in my past. I'm never going to do that again. Let's just move on, and nothing really heals. That underlying wound is still there. So, be patient. I know it's hard. Understand it won't always feel as bad as it does, initially. Things shift and change. This is a journey. And if you guys are both willing to do the work, things do really change. So I misspelled Sorensen. So I put a link and the proper spelling in the chat. So that's there. How do I access the recording? All of these things are on our Seeking Integrity site, and you will find them. I will specifically put the link in the chat in just a moment. So don't fear about that. I have said, this is the next question. I have said to my betraying partner, the story I tell myself and list what he said or did. And he comes back to me with, there you go with your assumptions. It's very frustrating for me that he can't even accept that I have my own perspective. Any advice on this? We are in couples counseling now, 3 years post D-Day, 7 months post formal therapeutic disclosure, and we are therapeutically separated. It makes communicating very hard outside of our couples counseling. Like I have heard this too, where, it's the story you're telling yourself and being dismissive of, I'm trying to come to you in a, a curious way. So thoughts on how do you handle something like that?
That is a hard one because obviously when you're in communication with somebody who's coming back at you like this, they're really not listening to understand, right? They're in this space for whatever reason that they're listening to argue, right? Or come back with their position. A lot of times when somebody says something like that to me, I use something I call the however boundary. Some people call it the broken record. And that is, I understand that you see that as my assumptions. However, when I see this and hear this, here's what I think about it, right? This is my internal world. And so in a way, you could say, yeah, that is my assumption. However, it's still valid, right? And here's what I need. For you, it sounds like maybe when you try to communicate, because you guys are therapeutically separated and you said it's really hard to communicate outside of couples counseling. My question is, are you guys working on some just basic ways to communicate, right? Because it sounds like there's so much disconnection right now. Do we have specific times you guys get together and talk about things? Can you kind of set a time? By that, I mean, lots of times when I go to talk to somebody and I know it's going to be a hard conversation, I sometimes like to give them a little warning, right? Like, I'm going to let him know, hey, I need to sit down and speak with you about something. And I'm just wondering, when would be a good time for us to do that, right? Would it be good to do that 15 minutes in the morning, right? I'm not going to push it off for 2 weeks, but maybe with your partner, if you can get him to agree to a time or set up a time where it's regular that you meet, and maybe you start out really small. Maybe you just start out with the recovery check-in that I gave you and just 2 things on it. Or you start out with Fanos if he's willing to do Fanos. Or you just start out with highs and lows or recovery work, right? And struggles or, tools you're using, struggles you're having. I don't know, but find something that you can talk about. And just, again, set a timer, do it simple, see if it goes well, and then circle back around and keep adding to it. Without knowing a lot of details, not being able to sit and visit with you in person, I don't know exactly where you're getting hung up, but it's really hard when you're dealing with somebody who cannot take on the perspective of somebody else. It's really, really hard. And that might be where they need to learn a little more about empathy. And I really love Brene Brown's video she has on empathy versus sympathy. That's a really great way to kind of introduce the concept to somebody. And I love her visual of when I have empathy, I'm getting down in the pit with somebody. I may not understand how they actually feel, but I'm going to be with them in their feelings. And so that might be a little educating, might go a long ways. But I do find sometimes that if I just validate what the person has said, I don't have to agree. I use the word however, and then I state where I'm coming from. And then maybe for you, you move right into the emotion. Here's how it makes me feel. Here's what I need. Maybe if you add those 2 parts to it, it might help it go differently in the future. So those are some of my thoughts about that. And with your therapeutic separation, the other question I would ask you is, what kind of format do you guys have put in place? I have like a 4-page document that when we do a therapeutic separation, we literally go through it, and we've got all sorts of things, as part of that document regarding how we spend time together, how we communicate, how we handle everything from what are the goals to what's the work I'm going to be doing. If you've got children, how we're going to manage the children, the finances, time together as a family. So that might be something, whoever helped you with the therapeutic separation, you might go back and add to that therapeutic separation, and maybe with the help of a therapist, figure out ways to communicate and what you will communicate about, and how you'll take a time out. And maybe for you guys, that could be very, very helpful when disconnection occurs.
Yeah, well, and it's always challenging when I hear therapeutic separation. I'm curious, like Debbie just shared, what is the plan? What is the documentation around that? And I feel for you, because what I hear is I'm so frustrated, and I can imagine how dysregulating it is. You are trying to attach, and this person is, shutting you down. So, I self-care for you. I posted, we've got the Betrayed Partners work group starting again on Sunday. We have 1 spot left for the Empowered Women's Retreat. We don't talk about him. It's really, it's really working on us, and it's amazing. So consider that, for you as well. So.
Yeah, and the other thing after you said that, what made me think is, as we talk about working with these women at the Empowered Women's Retreat, we're helping these women kind of step back into their own power. And sometimes when somebody makes comments like that to us, right? Oh, there you go, there's your assumptions again. It just takes away all of our power. And sometimes when we can work on ourselves and realize and recognize, hey, my needs are valid, right? It's okay for me to feel this way, and for me to these stories right now, because I don't know what the full truth is. I don't feel like I can trust, and to be able to then figure out what you need, what boundaries you need to put in place, what needs you have that you need to verbalize. And so when people do say that to you, the healthier you get, the more it doesn't throw you off. That's what I have found, because we have to stay pretty grounded when somebody invalidates us. We can't let it throw us off. And so that's what I love about working on stepping into that empowerment piece and not getting stuck in our stories, because we can, but just recognizing, yeah, this is kind of where I go. And the other thing is we need to check in on our stories. So I might have a whole story going on and, it causes me to act a certain way. And in the long run, then I treat the person differently rather than I've got a story going on in my head because what I've seen them do, I've heard them say, and I need to check in and see if there's any truth to it. So that's an important piece as well that I want to add.
My dog is going crazy. But I was thinking after you said that too, it's like I thought, well, how effective to shut you down too. It's like when you like there you go with your assumptions, like it would be challenging to not wilt. And so I love what what Debbie was talking about is like the broken record. I'm going to come back. I hear what you're saying. However, so go ahead.
I was going to say, you made me think of something, and that is, I tell my clients and those in my group, you use the broken record 3 times. And then at that point, you say, we're just going to have to agree to disagree on how we see this. And because you're not going to keep going back and forth, it's not going to do you any good. So I will use the however boundary, and I say the same thing each time. Yeah, I understand that you believe it's my assumption. However, this is how I'm experiencing it internally, right? I say that 3 times. And then finally, it looks like we're going to have to agree to disagree on how we're viewing my assumptions, right? My assumptions. And then you're going to have to let it go. And then step away, go to your support people, figure out what you need. Then if you need to come back later and express your needs, you have the ability to do so. The other thing I want to mention, because this has come to me a couple times, and that is I've been working with my group on understanding something called energetic boundaries. So when I'm with somebody, right, I can literally feel their energy. And some of us are very empathic, meaning I'm very attuned to how other people feel. I am also really sensitive to words and how they're said, the volume they're said at, even the energy behind the words. And some of us are born that way, very empathetic, very sensitive. And some of us, because of childhood trauma, we've had to learn to be super sensitive to our environment. So when I'm with somebody and their energy is really big, it can throw me off. So one of the visual tools, and I do believe that our brain has the ability through imagination to help us stay regulated, to help us heal. We know that because we do different types of modalities where we use visualizations. So what I do is if I know I'm going to have a hard conversation with somebody, or I'm starting to have that hard conversation and it's difficult, I literally put up an invisible wall and I imagine their energy staying on one side, my energy stays on this side, right? And so I'm literally telling myself not to take it personal, not to absorb it, just to let it be with them. And it's amazing what it'll do. I also teach about putting a bubble on. Figure out what your protective color is. Put yourself in a bubble. So if you're having hard conversations, bubble up before you have it. And again, you just set the intention that whatever is said is going to bounce off you and lovingly go back to them. And then that way I'm not soaking it up and absorbing it, because sometimes we're so sensitive, we really get thrown off. So just another thought, just kind of a little tidbit there to add.
And for guys like him that are really stuck like that, and like you guys have been at this a long time, we have a residential treatment program. I put the link in our, in the chat. Your bubble up. I love that. I do. I find I do this. I absolutely, and I say I'm putting on my Kevlar shield up. Yeah, and same thing. It's Kevlar. Nothing's coming through that. But yeah, having that visual, and I mean, I literally, sometimes I'll do this, but otherwise, I have the visual of the Kevlar. Up, minute, and I think it's so helpful to have that visual of no, I'm in here and I'm protected. So, the next one, this is like Thanos gone wrong. What do you recommend to keep a Thanos check-in from being a 2-hour discussion about what the addict has done?
Well, a lot of it is what we've already talked about. I believe you need to put a limit on it. So set a timer. And then maybe you restructure how you're doing Thanos. Are you having one person go all the way through their Thanos and then you're doing Thanos? Or are you both sharing feelings, right? And then we're sharing, right? Going down, each of us alternating. I think you need to put boundaries in place. Here's what let's make sure it covers, right? We want to stay connected. A lot of times I find that if I go to the other person and say, I want to do this so that we are going to stay connected. If this starts to go to a place where we start to disconnect, I would like to do a timeout, and then we can come back and pick it up the next day. So I'm going to guarantee you that if you're going 2 hours into a Thanos, one of you, if not both of you, is limbic. So there's no way you can hear the other person. There's no way you're going to emotionally regulate. You're going to have logic. You're going to be able to figure it out. So put some structures into place beforehand. Let your partner know, I do want to do a Thanos check-in with you. Maybe ask them if they'd be willing to try a different check-in every once in a while and see if that goes better. That you have them watch this webinar, and I've given you all sorts of kind of some things to put into place, some structure around that, setting the time of day, the space, the place, the amount of time you spend doing it. And then when the timer goes off, maybe you just stop. And so if you need to pick it up the next night, set the timer again and start where you left off and keep going, right? Maybe you've go a half an hour and you're only now to the O, right? Then same thing, take the time out. But I just feel like when we do it I even find with an hour long check-in, that people get so exhausted that you're going to create resistance. At least one person in the coupleship will become resistant to doing check-ins. And so we want to be able to do them. So that's why it's so important that if, it's not working this way, let's get creative and try it in different ways, or let's try a different type of check-in. Another check-in I really like that's very, very positive if we're trying to create connection is Gottman's check-in for couples. And why I like it is because it starts out with appreciations. So the first part is we share 5 appreciations for each other. The next step is we talk about what went right in the relationship. And then the next thing is we talk about where the struggles were in the relationship. And we're not going to choose 100. We're going to choose one struggle. And then we use a format, right? There's verbiage that we use, Again, it's a lot like the talking boundary, a little simpler. And so we're talking about it and trying to attune to each other. So the goal is attunement. So I'm listening. I'm trying to see it through my partner's eyes, step into their shoes. And again, get your notebook out, write things down, try to see it through their lenses, is what I say, and use reflective listening so that you can just be understood. A lot of us, we just want to be understood and validated. I hear that so much. And then the last part of that check-in is to ask for a need. What is something I can do in the next week to help you feel more loved? And so then your partner presents something, and if you have to negotiate with it, you do. If you're able to do it, then you commit to it and you follow through. And then you end the check-in with some type of affection, whether it's squeezing a hand, a hug, whatever feels comfortable to you. Or you can skip that part if you're not to that place yet where it feels safe. However, I do like this to mix it in with some of the hard recovery check-ins, because sometimes if we're checking in 3 and 4 times a week and going deep into recovery work, it's really hard. And I can hear from your question, if I were to read between the lines, that gosh, 2-hour discussion has got to be hard, especially if you're the addict and it's all about what you've done. How do you hear that for so long and not have your shame kick in and get defensive, unless you have a lot of skills and tools that you're really, really good at? I mean, I would even have a hard time in hearing that for that long and staying grounded. I really would. And I've got lots of skills and tools. So anyway, I
I
hope
was
that's
thinking the same
helpful.
thing. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, I would dread this check. I would dread it. And I have lots of skills and tools, and like that would be like I would, and I can only imagine that it's like the same things over and over and over again. I share with people looking to do Thanos start 2 to 3 minutes each. And then if there's something that you need to do more, write it
Mhm.
down. And I have found this to be really helpful. I get lots of positive feedback.
Mhm.
journal about, like, oh, let's bring that, and we're going to do that at our 20-minute on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm going to journal about it. Like, that's a great topic. I'm going to journal about it, and I'm going to journal about it in 10 minutes each. It's not like 19 minutes with 1 minute of response. Like, and then that's called communicating.
Yes.
It isn't being talked at. It isn't being, like, if the goal is healthy connection and relationship, like, I would be sure your behaviors, I understand the betrayed partner is hurt. I get it. But if you're looking to heal this, like, I don't know how that would ever be helpful. And I've heard too, like 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever. I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't handle a professional meeting when they get to that 2 hours. I'm just like, and
Mhm.
we're talking about positive things that, like, it isn't even about my behavior and all these things. So this feels like, if this is like a really sticky point, get professional help. This is, you guys are stuck. Like, this is I often use the negative two-step. You do this, I do this, you do this, I do this. You
Mhm.
guys are continuing this negative pattern, and nothing will change. You can continue doing this for years. Literally, or you can go,
Mhm.
this isn't so productive. This is not moving our relationship forward. And we both desire to have a better relationship, more healthy connection. So what are we willing to do that's different, each of us? And honestly, we say often with partners, like, you set up healthy boundaries and you hold that, like, okay, I'm going like, oh, something's different. Oh, my choreography is different. Yes. And healthy boundaries, everybody needs healthy boundaries. Matt Wheeler, who does these, on the alternating Fridays, talked about one time, he was like, the best relationships, have the most boundaries, because then you know what the expectations are. You know what each person's point is, but like, there isn't this guessing or whatever, and like, you navigate the relationship better. Because at first I was like, and then I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So, and everybody chooses their own path. So this is always take what you need and leave the rest. But like, that's a, like, oh, like, I cannot imagine a relationship that's moving forward. A check-in is a check-in. Like, hey, Deb, I'm checking in with you. Like, a quick
Mhm.
check-in, not like, let's sit down and have a, long drawn out, let's rate, pull all the dirty laundry out and let's rehash it again. Ooh, that,
Yeah.
not so helpful for either
So
of
you
you,
made
just
me think.
regulating for both of y'all.
Yeah. Yeah. You gave me a couple of ideas as you were talking that I have shared in the past. And that is, if you can't do check-ins verbally, then why don't you guys get a journal that's just your check-in journal, right? And journal to each other, right? And share that way. And then share feelings that way. And because I just love the fact that when we write, we really have to stay connected to prefrontal. Use the 4-part talking boundary. You could journal your Fanos. You could journal, right? I love the idea of coming in prepared to a check-in. It just makes it go so smoothly. But if you're so disconnected, and I'm thinking about our first person who asked the question, if it sounds disconnected, maybe that's a way is, hey, can we journal back and forth and do some check-ins that way? It works great with kids. I love it when you've got teenagers and you've got, elementary school kids that are a little older, even younger ones. You can do it with pictures, but we kind of communicate that way and we share a journal. What a great way to be able to share what's really inside of me and putting it on paper. So that's another thought as you were talking about that.
Well, and journaling, like, often, like, there's 4,000 words and we're not really getting at what's going on. And journaling really does help, refine that and go, oh, that's what's going. Or you see themes. Like, if you go, oh, I'm journaling about the same kind of theme here. Oh, that's something that's good data for me to go take to my therapist and work on. I mean, like, there's research on why journaling is useful. So, but
Mhm.
Erin Snow, our clinical director, that does part of the Empowered Women's Retreat, but also is doing the Monday evening webinars, has talked about, in their relationship, they do the journal, and it's on, I'm going to write in it, then I'll leave it on the bedstand. I'm going to write on it, I'll leave it on the bedstand. But yes, I can be really thoughtful about what I'm thinking through, not just words, flying out. So lots of,
Mhm.
like, there's lots of opportunity for healing. Please know that we are advocates of healing and hope for relationships. And whether each of you is on a recovery path or not, you can still find joy. Like, I say this to lots of betrayed partners. You can still have joy and safety, even if you live with somebody who continues to act out, but it's, it's the
Mhm.
Kevlar, like put your bubble in, and make sure you're taking care of
Put your bubble
you
on.
regardless of what somebody else is doing. So yeah, I love that. So,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
So I put resources in there. You can reach out to us. Debbie will be back in 2 weeks, and right?
I think I'm on vacation in 2 weeks.
Okay, I'll check the schedule. I've been updating
Yeah, I
everybody's,
know.
like, there's
It's
vacations
crazy.
and holidays, and yes, it is. So watch that,
But I do
but stay
think,
tuned.
yeah, I do think you and I are going to be doing a webinar when we're at the
I
Empowered
thought
Women's
of that.
Retreat.
I
So
was
that
like
would be
doing the
really
math.
fun.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
we'll
So
do
maybe
it
we can
together. We
share
might be
about
on the
that
same.
next time.
Yeah, yes, yes.
I
I
think we're
think
going
it'll
to
be
be in the
fun. So
same
yeah,
room. So everybody's got to
yes,
show up
yes,
for that one. It's
yes.
going to be
That'd be good.
first
So
time
yeah.
ever. Yeah.
Yes, yes, awesome. Thank you, Debbie. Great stuff. I have lots of notes again, and thanks everybody for coming and sharing your questions. We appreciate it. All right, take care, everyone. Bye.